to another edition of the Broad Podcaster with me, Jennifer Fierro, here in the Highland Lakes, joined once more with Daniel Clifton, who covers Canyon Lake Hawk football for us. And we're going to get to last week's games first, in particular because we are located here in Burnett County. Do want to recap the Canyon Lake and Burnett game because I feel like that was the big game last week. We'll talk somewhat about the Mustangs and what happened against them with Taylor. And then, probably in our third segment, we're going to do the playoff picture and talk more about that because there are only 2 games left in the regular season. My, how time passes when you're having fun. Daniel, I know that you were at the Canyon Lake game last week. What did you see between the Bulldogs and the Hawks?
Well, it was really good. It started out pretty even. They both changed, the first 2 drives, each of them, first 3 drives, there was scores. I think at the end of the first quarter, it was Canyon Lake 14-7, and it looked pretty evenly matched. And at one point in the third, and then they went 14-13. Burnett scored and kind of missed the extra point. And then on the next open drive, Canyon Lake had a punt, but Jaden Van Duyzel punted really well, pinned Burnett to the 2-yard line, their own 2-yard line. And if there was a play of the game that changed everything, if there was such a thing, it was this play that I think Rhett Murray, is that the quarterback? Rhett, right?
Yes, Rhett Murray, the junior.
Rhett Murray, they're 98 yards. Usually you think 98 yards, that's hard to do. Well, Rhett connected with Grant Jones, and it wasn't even a really deep pass. It's over to the side. It wasn't a deep pass, and Grant Jones runs the rest of the field and scores a touchdown. I think if there's one play that epitomized that game, it was that play. And it was just like Burnett just turned it on right there and just really kept going, and there was really no stopping them. I can't give them props. They tried, but they just could not play with Burnett after that. And I remember telling you were telling me last week, one of the things that Burnett liked to do is, I think you called it a little bubble pass out to the sidelines, and they used it a lot, and they get a couple good plays off it, and then they come across the middle and it kind of catch you off guard, and that's where they'd make some big runs, and it didn't have to go deep. He would just dump it 15 yards over the middle of the field, and they'd add another 10 yards, 20 yards after that sometimes on the runs. Yeah. They just did that so well. That bubble pass, you go out to the boat. They didn't have to run. I don't know how much running they did. They didn't do too much.
Yeah, I
bubble pass is a run.
I can give you the stats. The Burnett had 563 yards of total offense. This is from Coach Wood, so it's official. 202 on the ground, 361 in the air.
Wow.
And that is a far different from how Burnett beat Marble Falls a week earlier, because they rushed for 279 and threw for 40 and had a total of 319 yards. So, but that goes back to what I was saying to you leading up to this game, where I think the Coach Wood and his staff, I give them so much credit. They know who they are, and they know where their strengths are. And they did the one thing, because we talked about last week, Canyon Lake wanting to pass rush, put pressure on Rhett Murray, make him be the decider, to live by the blitz, die by the blitz. And when you have the bubble screen, because I learned this from Jared Rye, because I asked him one time about the bubble. Why do y'all throw so many bubbles? And he told me, he said he went to the whiteboard and he drew out his X's and O's. And he said, you see all this? And he drew a circle around the offensive line. And I said, yeah. And he said, when you throw a bubble, you eliminate all that. Ball's gone. And I don't know that people realize this, but what Burnett does, especially if they line up in triples, is they have the 2 receivers up front and they start blocking, and the receiver's supposed to catch the ball, takes a step backward, and he catches the ball and then he goes. But if Canyon Lake, and my thought was Canyon Lake may decide to go one-on-one with those receivers. And again, Grant Jones, if Burnett were to win the district, and we'll get into that in the third segment, because I've got a little more insight and a little more after last night's volleyball match, believe it or not. But if Burnett were to win the district championship, I think Grant Jones would be the MVP. And I say that with respect to the fact that Marble Falls has yet to play Lampasas and Davenport, and I have not seen those two teams. So, and I had some time today to kind of look ahead and look at some stats, especially with Marble Falls playing Lampasas this week. I wrote my preview for this week and really looked at their stats. But that's why you can eliminate and neutralize so much of the front seven on a defense, but that puts a lot of pressure on your receivers and your skill players to block. And when you have the seniors that Burnett has with Grant Jones, Will Johnson, Trenton Park, Dash Denton, they are committed to running. I think you sent me a photo where the lead blocker for Grant in one of the plays last week was Dash Denton.
Yeah, I
And I
believe
thought
that's
that
right.
was pretty cool. Yeah.
Good.
So, but that's where I think Burnett is just so much. They just know who they are, and they don't pretend to be anything beyond that. I give them a lot of credit because I cover a lot of teams right now that are still trying to find their identity, trying to figure out who they are. I can think of two or three football teams off the top of my head right now that are still trying to figure out who they are. Um, and some of it is because of injuries. Some of it is because they were depending on personnel that just didn't pan out. But Burnett knows, and that's why I told you I thought they'd make the playoffs. Um, and right now they are in a great position. They won a game, as Coach Wood said, because I do think that he and his players may have tuned in to the podcast last week. Because when I talked to him on Saturday, he told me Friday and Saturday, he said, it's time for us to win a game the computers say that we should not win. And that was sorry, I had something fly on my glasses. That was something we had talked about. That Burnett had won every game they were supposed to. All of their wins came at home, and winning at Canyon Lake. Not only was it their first road win of the season, they finally won a game that the computer said they were not supposed to. If only all of our teams, if only sports writers could motivate every single team they cover that way, right? Think of how great the world would be if we could all motivate the teams we cover that way. What did you think of the Burnett defense?
They did pretty well. They knew how to keep bottle everything up on that line on the offense of Canyon Lakes, and they played the that the offense that Canyon Lake runs the what
The
is it
slot
again?
T,
You tell me. My brain is
the,
God.
the
Slot
slot
T,
T offense.
slot T, and it's so confusing. But they stayed home and did their jobs. It was really, and I think that was one of the problems Canyon Lake had was that, and they couldn't open it up with the pass. They just couldn't do very well. They didn't do open the running game up with the pass. Because they didn't have because Burnett played it pretty tight. I mean, they had some good plays, decent plays on offense now and then. But Canyon Lake did, but after Burnett's defense just knew how to play it.
Yeah.
And once
Um,
Burnett's offense started gelling, they just stayed on the field longer and denied Canyon Lake time on the field like Burton they needed. And then Burnett's defense forced a lot of punts. I don't remember how many punts there were, but there was a good amount of punts. They had to punt a lot, and that was too bad.
yeah.
Canyon Lake.
Yeah. I did not get a drive chart from Coach Wood, but I know Coach Wood mentioned, and all of these stories are on TexasChalkTalk.com. Go there for the game stories. Coach Wood told me, and I forget how many it was, but he had talked about the number because they had scored in bunches, like one drive right after the other. I forgot the number now of how many he said, but it was like an avalanche. Once it started, it didn't stop. And it's interesting because I asked him about that Grant Jones touchdown. The
Uh,
one that he said, the kid that he really credited was Garner Kraus, because
oh yeah,
Garner had six catches for 131 yards and two TDs. Grant had six catches for 179 and one touchdown.
yeah. I
But
remember
he really,
Garner's number 4, right? He had a lot of passes over the middle to him. That's first time, and then the side he did the things. And go back to the punts. I think we Canyon Lake punted at least 4 times. 4 times they
my
punted, and
goodness,
you just can't do that if you're gonna stay in the ball game at this point. But yeah, that was, I think Garner was a wild card for those folk. I think everybody, because he stepped up, made some plays across the middle, had those 2 touchdowns. It was, say if you're playing Dash Denton, you're going against Dash Denton and Grant Jones, and then Garner shows up. It really was a good. They had a lot of ways to go. Burnett did, and they used everything they had, and they
yeah,
used it
that
effectively.
yeah, that's a sign of a well coached team. Like I said, they flipped the script. Marble Falls vowed to not let their skill players get going in the passing game. So, Dash Ditton and Lou Laidler and Chris Kasner had a field day running the football against the Mustangs. It sounded like Canyon Lake made the decision to not give up the run, and that allowed Rhett Murray and the receivers to get going with the passing game. And that's a great balance. That, in one sense, that is complementary football. Maybe not the traditional definition that you hear coaches talk about.
Yeah, and the coaches had a
Oh,
great. The Burnett coaches had a great game plan coming in there.
yeah,
Both
yeah.
on offense and defense.
Okay. All right. Anything else stand out to you about this game? I will say 250, Canyon Lake at 250 yards rushing, 134 passing, 384 of total offense, according to the Burnett coaches. It is interesting to me that Barnett has allowed a total of 161 points this season through 8 games so far. So that's not bad. That's right around 20 points a game with one shutout of the Mustangs. And then they are averaging, well, they have a total of 254 yards here. Um, so they are doing, I'm averaging about 40 points a game right now. It's just unheard of what the Bulldogs are doing. I wish I could say I'm surprised. I am not. I still say and maintain that as much as the loss to Taylor hurt that program and really bothered those coaches, I still say and maintain that those seniors every night, last game they think about is Taylor. When they wake
Oh
up in
yeah,
the morning, first game they think about is Taylor and how they lost last year. And that game will be a neat one to talk about here in week 11. Still have one more game to get to before that one. But I know we probably need to talk about the Mustangs. We will do that in the next segment unless you have something else you want to say here.
yeah. Yeah, I think Burnett. We talked a little bit about Burnett earlier in the season. Some of the struggles that they've had. They just seem to be gelling and peaking right now, coming together when they need to. It's one of the things where they found, like you talked, they found their identity. They know who they are, and now they're playing it. Now, it'd be interesting. It'll be exciting to see how they handle Davenport at Davenport this week. That's where they're going, I believe, right? Yeah.
Yes, they are at Davenport 7:30 on Friday night. Davenport, of course, is still undefeated in the district. They had a big win over Lampasas. We'll talk about that game. If we don't get to that game in the second segment, we'll get to it in the third because we do need to talk about the playoff picture here tonight as well. Okay, stay with us. We're going to close this segment out. We're going to talk about the Mustangs and the Taylor Ducks in the next segment. Stay with us. Daniel Clifton, I'm Jennifer Fierro, your broad podcaster here in the Highland Lakes. Come right back.